And just let me emphasize for this morning, profusely illustrated, wondrous photographs, barely exaggerated stories. That's what we do at the Atlanta History Center. Now, when last we left our hero, John Bell Hood, age 33, partially incapacitated but fully capable of reproducing in later life, he's stuck in a box. He is below the Chattahoochee River, past the last natural barrier to Atlanta. He has his 12-mile long ring of fortifications around the city, which do him no good if he cannot control the railroads. Davis expects me to fight for Atlanta. I can't lose the army in doing so. Can't pull a Vicksburg. Numbers are against me. Morale is sketchy. Here's the question. Is the fall of Atlanta inevitable at this point? What does Hood do in response to his charge? Fight for Atlanta? By God, I'm going to fight for Atlanta. Now, this is a homemade map produced to make this point. Okay, you saw the 12-mile ring around Atlanta. That's not this. That is I-285. That's the ring road, right? That, right there, that is the 12-mile ring of fortifications around Atlanta. And here we see the Western and Atlantic Railroad, which has supplied both armies up to this point, leading up to Chattanooga. Now that is fully in federal control. We still have the Georgia Railroad, which goes out past Stone Mountain over to Augusta. And we still have the railroad, primarily this one, that's going to lead down to Macon, and the Macon and Western that goes out to Alabama. So these are the arteries that are supplying the beating heart. He can't afford to just sit in his fortifications. He's got to protect those arteries. Sherman, of course, has got to cut those arteries. But before he does, Hood is going to try to throw him off his game. He is appointed on the 18th of July. 2 days later, he launches his first attack in true Hood style, right up here at Peachtree Creek. 2 days after that, and really this is all kind of one battle. Battle of Atlanta, July 22nd. Ezra Church, July 28th. In 3 attacks, in 8 days, all of which are repulsed. But by God, he fought for Atlanta, and he's held the place. Let's look at them. The first of them, Peachtree Creek, trying to throw off the Army of the Cumberland as it's coming south. Again, headed towards those outer defenses to cut those railroads. When I become king of the world, 2 things are going to happen in the United States. One, all of our liquor laws will be made uniform throughout all of the states. So it's not going to be like I can go here and it's a dry county and I can only buy it after 7 o'clock or before 7 o'clock here and it's a 14% alcohol there. No. I love me some state rights and all that, but by God, some things are important. Alcohol. Number 2, we're going to make all Civil War maps the way I want them. They're going to have the features that I want to see, that you want to see, and they're going to be uniform so that we all see the same thing, right? Some have mountains, some have rivers, some have cities, some have armies, some are in blue, some are in red, some are in green. All the same, right? But this is an example of what maps can and cannot show you. And the influence that this has on our thinking. This is a map from Bill Scaife, the great late historian of Atlanta, 1993. Here he's showing the federal and Confederate forces at the beginning of the Battle of Peachtree Creek. Here are the federal forces coming in from the north, Hooker's Corps, Howard's 4th Corps. Here is the Confederate attack, and you can see how he has arranged the various brigades and divisions very neatly in these sweeping lines, you know, and it's superimposed over terrain, you know, to give you some sense of terrain, but it's a sweeping, very neat thing. And when you look at this, you see, well, what I see is a Confederate frontal attack that just smoothly, all at once, coordinated, goes up against this wall of Federals. That's the Battle of Peachtree Creek, according to this map. Let's look at the ground. This is why this map is deceiving. Let's look at the terrain. We talked about terrain yesterday. Peachtree Creek's a great example of the problems that you encounter. Here is Peachtree Creek. This is the natural barrier, not much of one, but it was enough to where part of the Army of the Cumberland had crossed, part had not. The idea was to catch the part that had crossed, separated from the part that had not. That required timing. Didn't quite work out that way. But the bottom line is, Hood does sense that he has an opportunity here, and he's going to try to make the most of it. But look at this terrain, and this still exists. This is a modern day photograph. Over here, this is actually on the left wing of the Confederate attack. It's this deep ravine that is, I think, every bit as deep as the one that we saw yesterday at Pickett's Mill with the trees and stuff. This is unchanged. It can't be developed because of the terrain, except for these guys managed to stick a house in there. Here's the site of Collier Mill. So you have, and this is in the center of the Confederate attack. So you have a situation where you've got high ground, you know, on either side. It's a tactical situation, and you've got a rocky stream in the middle. How are you going to maintain command and control when your forces are split up this way? They can't even see each other necessarily. So if you're here, can you really see what's beyond that hill? This battle is going to be a battle not of the commanding generals. This will be a battle of the lieutenants and the captains and the sergeants, and at most the colonels. And even the colonels will only have command of those few troops that are in their immediate vicinity. So this is where the experience of the two sides will come in handy, because the terrain prevents any kind of thing like the great, you know, Battle of Antietam, where one could see across the entire battlefield and make these masterful McClellan-like strokes by sweeping here and sweeping there. No, this is hard backwoods fighting in what was essentially at that time still a wilderness. Benjamin Harrison, future U.S. president, commanded the brigade that was astride that little creek where Collier Mill was. So he's literally got part of his command on one side and part on the other. He was famous, of course, for the commanding the 70th Indiana, and actually turns out to be one of the saviors of the day for the Union Army, along with the guy we talked about yesterday, Fighting Joe, which I said this was his finest moment, and I still kind of think that's so. All right, now look, here's how the battle was developed, right? This is our friend Bob Jenkins, who's an attorney up in Dalton. My friend forever because he handled my divorce. So, I trust him with the history. So not with Kim, that was the one previous to Kimberly, yeah, no, not the, but look at the Confederate attack and look at the shattered nature of the Federal line when the attack is fully developed. The Federals are not expecting this. The Federals are not expecting this. Sherman is not expecting this. Not all of the brigades or regiments of Hooker's 20th Corps, including and especially Ward's division, are dug in. They think the rebel army is still a ways away. They're alerted to the rebel army by the fact that their forward outpost with the 33rd New Jersey is overrun suddenly by Confederate troops, and the guys come streaming back and they say, here they come, boys, by God, 1 million of them, get ready. Well, look at this huge dent in the line. This is Featherston's brigade. Look at O'Neill's brigade right up here. Right? That ravine that I showed you, that's that ravine. And they press as far as they can into that ravine. These are Alabamians, Tennesseans, 24th South Carolina's over there. They press as far as they can into that weak point. If this had been Manassas, Federals would have run off the field. This ain't Manassas. This is Army of the Cumberland. These are veterans, right? These are veterans of Gettysburg. They've been there, they've done that. We ain't doing that again. So look what happens. They close in. They're closing in on both sides of O'Neill's brigade in the ravine, firing down, catching them definitely catching them in a trap, in essence. Over here, Newton's 2nd Division of Virginia actually holds the line at Piedmont Hospital because he has that huge mass of the glass building of the hospital to protect him. In the ravine, 29th Alabama is shot to pieces. This coat belonged to Private John Johnston. He was wearing this coat this day when he was shot. The coat contains 3 bullet holes. If you stand the coat up, it's a homemade frock coat, you can see the passage. You can see actually 4 bullet holes in the tail. One in, one out, one in, one out. And they're at an angle. They go down. The one that got him was in the neck. That's this one. He died in the hospital a few days later. The story is that his wife and infant child had come to see him and somehow found him in the hospital and were able to take this coat home with them. Brutal fighting. Here's Lieutenant George Young, shot at the top of that hillside near the ravine. He's shot through the leg here. He's on his horse. He's a courier. The bullet goes in through the horse into the inside of his calf. He is wounded. The horse is killed, and in the report here, he has to, in typical Army style, he has to account for why he lost his government property. So there's an article, horse, and then horse and bridle, and he says the cause of losing government property is, well, the horse was killed in the Battle of Peachtree Creek, July 20th, 1864, and the halter was on the horse, and I was wounded and prevented from saving the same. Sorry. That wound forces him out of the Army. He goes home, convalesces. He's never able to go back into military service. He lives a long life after that, but that wound never actually heals. In 1909, when he dies, the cause of death on his death certificate reads chronic septic infection, gunshot wound, many years. 1909. So yeah, we talk about the ones who were killed then and there, who suffered then and there. What about who suffered for the rest of their lives? That's on display in our exhibition. the only photograph that we have of this battlefield taken nearer at the time. This is the George Barnard photograph, the battlefield of Peachtree Creek, Georgia. We did not know where this picture was made, where this photograph was made. And it was kind of a wilderness area. This is probably the only open spot that he found. So where is this? No one quite knew. Library of Congress some years ago, thank you Library of Congress, scanned these images and scanned them at such high resolution, and they were so clear to begin with, that you could begin to read some details in them. This shows some federal grave markers, temporary grave markers, put up to bury the dead. Now we're assuming that they're going to bury the slain not too far from where they were killed. They're not going to drag the bodies. Notice this one. You can read. It's like the cannon muzzle we saw yesterday. Captain John P. Seaman, a German from Wisconsin. He was one of the 48ers. He died there. He was subsequently, like all of the, or most all of the federal dead from the Atlanta campaign after the war in 1866 at $1 per body, the federal government paid to have these bodies removed and reinterred in the new National Cemetery at Marietta, just where all of the Atlanta campaign people are. There's his tomb, there's his marker. So, right, so if we know where the 26th Wisconsin fought at Peachtree Creek, and we figure they didn't move his body too far away from that point, then we know where that photograph was made. At this little bucolic pastoral scene in a little neighborhood, and like most other places in Atlanta, thousands of people pass here every day. I have no idea. I have no idea. And this was one of the most brutal fights in that field. What I like about this photograph too is, and we don't know exactly if this matches that previous one, but it kind of does resemble it. You know, the trees on both sides. So there's a little artistic license in that. That's approximately what we're looking at. This is why I said yesterday, you have to use your imagination a little bit to see the battles for Atlanta. Okay, that's what we're talking about. There is a monument. There was a monument to the Battle of Peachtree Creek that the old Atlanta Historical Society, which is now the Atlanta History Center, put up in 1944 to celebrate American valor. American valor referred both Union and Confederate. That's maybe a little bit less PC than what was wanted. Besides, the hospital needed the land. That monument has now been removed and safely hidden, waiting for another day to be re-erected. But yes, there was a monument. Bottom line of this battle, you see it here. You know what? It was a reasonable plan. You know, Army separated, make the attack, throw them back, poorly executed for the reasons we discussed. But by God, could put a hurt on the Yanks. But by God, them being veterans, bully boys, they held. Atlanta remains in Confederate hands. That's the butcher's bill. Not even. A slugfest. It's really about all that was. Yes, strategically, Confederate defeat, they don't drive the Federals off, or tactically, a Confederate defeat, don't drive the Federals away, but strategically, still hold Atlanta. But at the cost of those casualties. All right, no worries, not deterred. Hood's still at it. He's going to do exactly what his buddies that knew him back in the day, including Schofield, said he would do. By God, he's going to attack. And Sherman says, oh, it's great. It's just what we want. We want to come out of the trenches and attack us. All right, we're going to get that. Be careful what you wish for, Uncle Billy, because here they come again. 2 days later, This is the Battle of Atlanta. The Battle of Atlanta is a little, you know, like there's only one. I have a lot of visitors who think that there's only one, and then suddenly after this battle, the city burned down. No, no, no. It was one of these three, so this is the second one. Just happened to get the name Atlanta as opposed to something else. I'm beginning to note my maps here to reminding you of that point about I want universal maps. But here's Hood's plan. I mean, this is a good plan. This is what Steve Davis and Albert Castell said, you know what, this is a plan worthy of Lee. So what we're going to do here, this is the defended 12-mile ring around Atlanta. Here's the Army of Cumberland up here. It's just repulsed the Confederate attack. So we're going to take, Hood says, we're going to take Hardee's Corps, which didn't fight too well at Peachtree Creek, and we're going to Stewart's Corps, or excuse me, Cheatham's Corps, and we're going to hold the, this time we're going to go after the Army of the Tennessee. Cheatham's Corps is going to hold them in front, Hardee around the flank. Their flank is in the air. We're going to send Wheeler back here to Decatur to attack the wagon train. This is going to be Chancellorsville all over again, right? A plan worthy of Lee. Oops. McPherson, there is no fear in McPherson. Being cautious this time pays off because he actually anticipates that something like this might happen. Sherman wants these guys to go off and start wrecking the railroad. McPherson said, hold on now. Our flank's in the air. Let's defend it. And by God, that turns out to be the difference on the day when the attack is made. So this is the map by the U.S. Military Academy. Ah, now this is the map by the American Panorama Company of Milwaukee, created in 1886. Actually is one of the first attempts to map this battle. Granted, for the purpose of entertainment and spectacle, but nevertheless tried to incorporate this action and for the first time record where the troops were, because there were no official records. The atlas for the official records still being compiled, so we didn't quite have the information that we have now. So they sent a team of artists to sketch the landscape. They interviewed the veterans. They had Theodore Davis, who was the Harper's Weekly correspondent, who had been there, who had witnessed the battle. He was friends with Sherman, he was friends with Logan, he was friends with all these guys. He was their technical advisor for these German artists who were painting this scene. And so they composed a scene of the Battle of Atlanta. And this is the one that some of y'all saw when you were in Atlanta. So preliminary sketches and then the final. It's important to note, though, that that whole painting that you see is really only a small part of the battle. And the main part of the battle actually takes place about a mile to the south. Here we're going back to Bill Scaife's map. So you can see there's the cyclorama vantage point, the little star in the middle. Fighting down here on the high ground where Hardee has made his attack and McPherson has placed some troops in defense to protect that flank. This fighting goes on for about 8 hours, beginning circa mid-afternoon or midday. This fighting, depicted in a cyclorama, goes on for about an hour and a half. And it's at 4:45 in the afternoon. As I said, you kind of have to use your imagination, especially when you're looking at what was known as Bald Hill or Leggett's Hill, which is this high ground right here, which is where I-20, Interstate 20, now goes right through there, and they obliterated the hill, taking out about 50 feet of height of that hill, so there's no more hill. to be seen. So you really have to use your imagination there. But let's go into that little circle. And this is what the artists are trying to show you about this portion of the battlefield. They're showing you that, in fact, and this is true, that up here in this northern sector, a lot of federal troops had already been diverted as reinforcements down to the south, down to Bald Hill, where the main attack was taking place. So the lines in the north were a little bit stretched, the north of the line. And that's where the Confederates, with Cheatham, that's where Hood sends Cheatham in the afternoon as a diversionary attack just for this purpose, because he's figuring out, yeah, look, we're making progress. We're driving the Federals, however hard it is down there in the south around Bald Hill. We are making a little bit of progress. We're spending a lot of casualties, making a little bit of progress. Now let's hit them up top. Let's hit them up north. And so he launches Cheatham's Corps. They break through those thinly held Union lines, make a significant gain, put the Yanks on the run, put the Army of the Tennessee, 15th Corps especially, on the run. Not really on the run. They're just going to reposition themselves. They just fall back. They've been here before. This is not Manassas. They know what's going to happen. They're going to reform, they're going to call up reinforcements, they're going to counterattack, and that is the moment that's depicted in the painting. The moment that's depicted in the painting is the moment of triumph, or actually the moment right before the moment of triumph. So this is right before kicking the winning goal, and the painting is essentially the replay of the kicker who is in position. He's about to kick the ball, and you know what's going to happen. You know you're going to win the game. You've heard the story before. Your fathers have told you that. This is 22 years after the war, right? The old veterans, they know what's going to happen. Well, that was a great moment. Remember that moment when we were in Atlanta, we were on our back heels, and they launched that surprise attack, and we were overwhelmed, and then we came back, and we kicked the winning field goal. The winning goal. That's the moment, right? That's the moment of drama that the artist shoots. There it is. 4:45 in the afternoon, looking west towards the city. You're about 2.5 miles east, around the great big red house, the Troop Hurt house, and the DeGrasse battery, the 1st Illinois, Battery H, equipped with some of that long range iron artillery, 20-pounder Parrott rifles. So here comes the Federal counterattack. There, the Confederate defenders, and literally within moments of this scene, you will see the Confederates, depending on one's point of view, either kicked out of their beachhead or choose to retreat. Either way, they don't hold the field. And the Federals will push them back. And that's the end of this action. But it's a very dramatic moment. And it's a very dramatic moment because, oh, back up. We do know where this took place. So, unusually for Atlanta, we do know the location, okay? It's precise. The railroad bed is still there. That's still the railroad. That's still the Georgia Railroad. And the foundations for the Troop Hurt House were uncovered, discovered by Wilbur Kurtz before this little church was built on the site. So this is the site of the house on DeGrasse Avenue, named for the captain whose battery was taken there. And so we also know from this a little bit about the layout of the Federal line. We also know that the space depicted in the painting is smaller than the space in reality. Okay, the railroad wasn't as close to the house. No matter what else you want to say about the Battle of Atlanta cyclorama, we got to give it to him in some aspects for being historically accurate. As opposed to that other cyclorama in Gettysburg, that insignificant Eastern battle that some of you may have heard of, painted by Frenchmen, first version painted in Belgium, next version painted in Paris, two other versions painted, sent over from Europe by French artists, as opposed to the Battle of Atlanta, painted in 1886 in Milwaukee, an American composition and painted in America, painted in the United States. By God, this is the only surviving cyclorama composed and painted entirely in the United States, and accurate because, the French had models, and they used French soldiers. So that's why you see this kind of silly stuff in the, in the Battle of Gettysburg. Milwaukee, man, they had the veterans there. And those veterans were walking into that studio every day. Hey fellas, we look like this, we did this, you gotta paint like this, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I'm staying. So that's how we get, I think, a level of accuracy in this painting that we don't see in Gettysburg. Back to our theme of showing Northern victory. Looking north, okay, so Treepert House over there. Looking north, oh my God, there's Yankee heroes everywhere. Look at that nice thought. And the audiences at the time are going to be able to say, I can pick out every one of those. Boy, I know exactly what's going on. Look right here. Slasher is bringing forward Blackjack Logan, who is rallying the troops in all of the ways previously described. He has electrified the battlefield, and the guys are shouting, "Blackjack, Blackjack, Blackjack," as he rides by, and they're cheering. They're coming up behind him is Francis de Grasse, who wants to retake his battery. He's embarrassed that his battery has been retaken. Francis de Grasse is also of German origin, despite the name. Actually went to a Prussian military school as a teenager. So riding forward in the counterattack. This is all true stuff. This is not made up by the artist. But there was some artistic license. Theodore Davis, I mentioned earlier, the historical consultant, and Benjamin Harrison, who was at the Battle of Peachtree Creek, but not at the Battle of Atlanta. But Benjamin Harrison is running for president on the Republican ticket in 1888. This is when the cyclorama is displayed in Indianapolis, his hometown. And Davis, being something of an egotist, is the only one of the artists to have himself painted into the painting. There he is, circled. You can see him up there. And there he is, as painted in 1886. But in Indianapolis, the cyclorama owner, who was a Republican, and very much for Benjamin Harrison, said, this guy ought to be in the painting. This would be great for the presidential campaign, would it not? Our hero, let's put him in. Paint out that egotistical, and put in Harrison instead. Now this provoked a political firestorm. Democrats in town got very upset. Bottom line is the cyclorama owner had to agree to, okay, I'll put Davis back in, no worries, but I'll resign, okay, fine. We'll put Davis back in. So in 2017, when we are doing the restoration of this painting as it's been moved to our new site from Grant Park, we built a new building for it on our property. And I'm reading about this story, I'm finding this in the newspapers. Davis is in the painting, where is he? Well, he's in this quadrant up here. Where is he? I don't see him anywhere. All I see is a guy, I see this federal general on a white horse, got a double-breasted coat. Looks like a general. Who's that? Damn. They never repainted Davis. Benjamin Harrison's been there that whole time. We went back to the artist's original intent, which we knew from having the photographs of the way it was completed in 1886. So we put Davis back in. No judgments. That's what the artist intended. That's what we have in the painting today. But there are more federal heroes, including Sherman himself on his horse, Duke, standing very, almost impossible to see, but if he were really standing a mile away at the, or half a mile away at the Augustus Hurt House, and at that size, he would have been about 25 feet high, which probably about right for Sherman's stature in the public mind at the time. Also, what you see here is, the thing that the Northern public knew about this battle was that this is the one where General McPherson was killed, commander of the Army of the Tennessee, one of the only two Army commanders to be killed in the war, the other being Albert Sidney Johnston. And even though he's killed on the other end of the battlefield, on that southern end, the southern end of the battlefield near Bald Hill, the artists want to show him, somehow incorporate him in the painting, so they've got his ambulance as his body is brought to Sherman's headquarters. It's depicted here, and there's actually a little honor guard of cavalry standing next to it. I'm sure that's pretty much imagined. Meanwhile, another Northern hero that would have been known to many, particularly in the Milwaukee area, another German, August Mersey, who's being shot off of his horse, and his beloved horse, Billy. He was more upset about the loss of his horse than he was about his own wound.
Where's that one? Sorry. Is that in that painting?
Yeah, this, I tell you what, this right here.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it's actually just,
Oh,
it's just there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just there. This, by the way, is where the Carter Presidential Library is today. If that means anything to you. So McPherson was the big story for the Northern public, and it was the big story in the Atlanta campaign as he was shot while essentially reconnoitering the lines around midday. Interestingly enough, this is the first monument placed in Atlanta, a Confederate city, and it's the first monument of any kind to any Civil War figure, and it's placed to a Yankee general in 1877 because there's a U.S. military post established in Atlanta, and the officers knew where the site was. The site had been marked at the time, so we can be fairly certain that the upright cannon that was placed there as the memorial is probably right about where McPherson was killed. Just to give you an idea of the esteem with which he was held, I picked this up at the Dalton Civil War show a couple months ago. CDV, and on the back, CDV of McPherson, and it says, General McPherson, killed July 18th, 64 at Peachtree Creek, Georgia. Which is incorrect. It's okay, somebody made a mistake. This man, our Western boys love as the idol of their hearts. He came next to Sherman. We mourn his loss. Some private soldier, some anonymous soldier. Not depicted in the cyclorama. General William Henry Talbot Walker, old shot pouch, known for his wounds in the Seminole War and the Mexican War, with his monument that was erected in 1902 and the Chevron station used to service the monument, along with the sword that he was carrying that day when killed, which is in the same case as those other items we were just talking about. one of the treasures in our collection. This map, I think, gives you a better idea, particularly of what was going on here in the south, where the federal line is rolled up to a certain degree, where they're fighting all afternoon, including Claiborne, who's launching some incredibly bitter and effective attacks down here. But look at the depth of the penetration of that Confederate attack that's depicted in the diorama. That's some serious business right there. So the bottom line is, you know what? This is a good plan, a plan worthy of Lee. Problem was is you couldn't get Hardee around the flank, 12-mile march at night, and still get him in there in time, in any kind of condition to fight. Plus, McPherson had put these units there to contest the advance. So, even though Hood puts a hurting on the Yanks, they hold. The attack's failure tactically, strategically though, success. Atlanta remains in Confederate hands. Let's move on. That's battle number 2. That's the Butcher's Bill. Notice this one. We're starting to climb here. Now, this is not nearly as much as what Sherman would have you believe. And we had this discussion last night about casualty, inflated casualty. Oh, I counted 10,000 dead Confederates in front of our lines. I counted it. These estimates are the ones that my friend Steve Davis, this is Albert Castell, there's a bunch of us. It was a sort of a summit meeting that we had some years ago for the purposes of putting up another exhibit. And we tried to come up with a reasonable estimate, albeit, of course, nothing is perfect, of what the actual casualty figures were. Nevertheless, that's starting to tell. July 28th, third attempt. All right, so we have McPherson, the Army of the Tennessee and Sherman, who were coming in from Decatur. They now control that Georgia Railroad. That was the whole point of that battle, was controlling that railroad, which of course the railroad bisects the painting, as you see. So that railroad is now in federal control. Western and Atlantic has already been under federal control. So now this is the battle here for East Point, for the Atlantic and West Point, for the Macon and Western. This is where Sherman is going to send the Army of the Tennessee, now under Howard, to Ezra Church with order to go back south and try and seize that railroad. Meanwhile, Hood sends out newly appointed Corps Commander Stephen Dill Lee, says, I want you to hold the crossroads. But Lee gets there and he finds out that the Federals have already occupied those crossroads. His orders are to occupy those crossroads. Says, well, I believe that I can drive them away from the crossroads. Stephen Dill Lee held a variety of commands, artillery, cavalry, infantry, but from South Carolina, so prone to the attack, 31 years old, the youngest lieutenant general in the Confederate Army. What's he do? He launches a frontal attack. Vague plan, badly executed, poor judgment on Stephen Dill Lee's part. Should have never done this attack. The Army of the Tennessee, just victorious a few days earlier, now teaches Stephen Dill Lee a hard lesson in frontal attacks. Again, tactically, a failure, a big defeat. Strategically, a victory. Atlanta remains in Confederate hands. This is the Butcher's Bill. Look at that number. Right? This is where it's starting to tell. Yeah, I'm going to hold Atlanta. Am I going to lose my army in the process? Now the game becomes, all right, let's go after that last railroad. The Confederates understand this, Hood understands this. He understands that he has to extend his lines as far as he can to the south to cover the Macon and Western Railroad, which you see here. All right, and he's going to extend his siege defense lines all the way down here to East Point, almost down to where the airport, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, is today. Sherman, this is best he can come up with is, okay, I'm going to bombard Atlanta into submission. I will demoralize the Confederate Army staying there, and I will send out my cavalry, as discussed ably yesterday, to cut that railroad. So that's my plan. Note, siege is in quotes. Not really a siege. A siege means you're completely surrounded. This is a semi-siege because federal forces are really just here. They're not here. There's still a big escape route down here. All right, so this is the game, the siege of Atlanta over the next month. This is the one that most people, perhaps because of Gone with the Wind, remember. What's the result of Sherman's bombardment? What's the result of those cavalry raids? Nothing. Atlanta remains in Confederate hands. Sherman throws 30,000 rifle shells. That's our estimate. That's our best estimate. That's a Steve Davis estimate. There's only 3,500 civilians left in town. We started out in 1861 with 12,000 civilians. We went up to 20,000 civilians with the influx of war workers and refugees. Now most of them have vamoosed out of town. Those that can afford to go. Anybody that can't afford to go, they're still there. 3,500 of them, but they're hiding down in their bomb-proof shelters, and that bombardment really doesn't do much for them. We only suffer about 50 civilian casualties. Now Sherman, in the meantime, of course, has a great time. He loves artillery, so he's aiming some of those individual shots. Hey, can we hit that church steeple right there? Can we hit that like we hit Polk? You know, we get a good number on Polk. Can we do that? Can we perforate that? He loves artillery. But ultimately, does no good whatsoever, because Hood still holds that railroad. That changes. Finally, the last week in August, Sherman does what he probably should have done a month ago. He takes one corps, the 20th Corps, he puts it up to guard his crossing at Chattahoochee, and he sends 6 of his other 7 corps, or sends all of his other corps, way south on what he calls his grand flanking maneuver. And he's going to go after that railroad way beyond where the Confederate trench line extends. Forces Hood, who at this point has 38,000 men, to defend 12 miles of the Macon and Western Railroad. That's his last lifeline. He's got 30. Are you gonna? Where is Sherman going to strike? He does not have his cavalry. Wheeler's off somewhere else. He does not have his cavalry. He doesn't know where Sherman's going to be exactly. Sherman has 56,000. He can cut that railroad anywhere he wants. Anywhere where they're not, or even where they are, he can cut the railroad. It's simple. It's easy. You can do this, right? This is the solution to the camp. Why didn't Sherman come up with this earlier? Okay, but he comes up with it now. Hood sends Hardee down to Jonesboro, anticipating that this will be the point. And in fact, it's not, because the 23rd Corps reaches Rough and Ready. The rest of the Army of the Cumberland reaches midway point between Rough and Ready and Jonesboro. Down here is Hardee's Corps and the Army of the Tennessee. There's actually two battles at Jonesboro. The first day, the Confederates attack, trying to drive the Federals back and away from the railroad. That does absolutely no good whatsoever, because the Federals, unbeknownst to them, have already cut the railroad north of them, so it doesn't matter what they do. This is a waste of lives, waste of time. The next day, Hardee is trying to hold his position from a Federal attack, because Hardee is now separated from the rest of the Army of Tennessee. He does hold his position, but barely. Most important thing, though, is the railroad's cut. The railroad is cut. The artery is cut. There is no way to maintain your army in the defenses of Atlanta without it starving, like at Vicksburg. Hood, what are you going to do? Here's the butcher's bill, and it's relative to the actions of the armies. As you see here, a Confederate attack beginning to, now it's really telling, because these guys are really having a hard time going up against entrenched positions, and they know it, and their morale is really at a low point. Hardee is lucky to hold on that day at Jonesboro. Here's an important point. We've been talking about this thing about, Army versus the city, right? Which is most important. An aggressive commander would bag Hardee's entire corps while it's separated from the rest of the army. This is a golden opportunity. And then roll up the line and capture the rest, or at least beat the crap out of the rest of the Army of Tennessee, roll them up north. So you would in fact capture Atlanta and destroy the Army of Tennessee. Get both things. You do both things. That would be utterly cataclysmic. Sherman, not being that commander, wires Washington, connected by telegraph, his famous line, "Atlanta is ours and fairly won." He is content to let the Army of Tennessee go. He has what he wants. He has Atlanta. And that turns out to be good enough. It's not the best he could do. He could do better. He could inflict far more damage. He could wrap this thing up a lot sooner. But you know what? Capturing Atlanta is good enough. Why? Because the political aspect. August 31st, the same day that the 23rd Corps first reaches that railroad, starts to tear up the tracks, 600 miles away in Chicago, a bunch of blowhards are nominating George McClellan, and on the platform are these words. A plank in the platform says, "We demand that immediate efforts be made for a cessation of hostilities. We cannot win the war. We have to stop this bloodshed. We have to stop this useless infusion of blood and treasure. Sherman can't win in Atlanta." Damn, Sherman just has. He just has, on the same day. By God, this is a turning point in the American Civil War nobody knows about, August 31st. This is the other turning point. Evening of September 1st is when Rhett Butler joins the Army of Tennessee. Melanie and the baby and Scarlett get out of town. Oh, and then Hood, he leaves Atlanta too. I forgot that, but so he has to go. But before he leaves town, Hood will order the burning of the set from the movie King Kong. And this is a very important set because, right there with King Kong, you had the Atlanta Rolling Mill, which is the only place in the Confederacy besides Richmond capable of making railroad track. There's the Georgia Railroad. There they are crossing. There's the stunt man. There's the stunt nag. This is the great dramatic scene that you all know, and we all know from the movie. There it is in real life. The image is known in George Barnard's composition of photographs as the ruins of Hood's ordnance train. And what had happened, of course, is that the resupply for Hardee down in Jonesboro, this train was going down south, loaded with artillery and other ammunition. They found that the railroad line had been cut. It has to chug along backwards, back up into the city. There's no way now to get it out. So it is backed up on the tracks next to the Atlanta Rolling Mill. The Georgia militia go in there with firebrands, set the thing on fire and run like hell. Produces a huge, big, giant explosion, and that's how Slocum and the 20th Corps up at the Chattahoochee River crossing know something big has happened. Yeah, he's blowing up the ammunition. He's getting out of town. Tracks are still there today. Atlanta Rolling Mill became, of course, in the New South, a cotton mill. It's cotton. Now, in the New South, it's very bougie rented lofts with coffee shops, and bicycles, and roundabouts, and other forms of social life. But we still have our train tracks. You know how we talked about the Texas winning the great locomotive chase? Yeah, here's another way it kind of beats its rival. The General was one of those locomotives that was blown up, actually ran into each other intentionally to destroy them. During the course of this destruction, as the Confederates are getting out of town, you can see here, look at the shrapnel holes where the artillery ammunition is blown up, and is blown up through the stacks, blown up through the boiler. The entire cab is gone. The General is essentially wrecked, and it's going to have to be rebuilt. It's going to be rebuilt 3 more times after this. The Texas, on the other hand, was in Virginia, in Bryan's home country, hauling salt, so it escaped all this, and was only rebuilt once. So there's actually more original parts on the Texas than on the General, even though that's a very tiny percentage, nevertheless. Morning of September 2nd, remember we had left the 20th Corps up at the Chattahoochee River crossing. Everybody else in Sherman's army is way down south, around Jonesboro and so forth. So to the 20th Corps belongs the credit of marching into Atlanta. That would have been Joe Hooker had he remained. Whoops. And Mayor James Calhoun, who was himself probably a Unionist, led some other secret Unionists out to meet the advancing forces of the 20th Corps and formally surrendered the city, and the jig is up. City surrendered, Hood is gone. The big garrison flag that was flying probably over downtown Atlanta, probably near the passenger depot, hauled down and taken away as a souvenir. This is a 20 by 10 foot flag. This is on display in our exhibition. I can't help but wonder if it's not that flag. I'm sure David Selznick did not have this other flag in mind when he filmed this scene, but he might. It turns out to be a very happy coincidence, because from my research, we have located only one flagpole big enough to carry that big flag, and it was located not far from where this scene is supposed to be. Sherman now occupies Atlanta. These are his original orders in our collection, in his own hand, in which he orders the evacuation of all civilians from the city. All surviving civilians from the city are to be evacuated. Unionists, rebels, rich, poor, 3,500 of them, we're giving you transportation. You can either head south to Rough and Ready, you can head south from there, you can head north. We don't care, we just want you out of the city. We're going to fortify Atlanta, it's going to be a military base, and I don't want you people threatening any kind of, sabotage, and most importantly, I don't want you people coming and begging me for rations, like you people always do. Get out of town, we're at war. I'm Sherman, you're not. He holds on to Atlanta, even though Hood has actually done something fairly smart at this point. He's taken his army and has gone back up the Western Atlantic Railroad, trying to cut Sherman's supply line the way that Sherman had cut his. Sherman actually sends portions of his army up to chase Hood up into North Georgia, no matter, because Sherman still keeps his force in Atlanta. He still holds Atlanta, and as long as he holds Atlanta and the northern newspapers see him holding Atlanta, if he moves his army out of Atlanta, the Confederates have recaptured Atlanta. No, he holds Atlanta, and as long as he holds Atlanta, that's a victory. That's a victory which, along with Cedar Creek, thank you, and I think Mobile Bay, that's what pushes Lincoln over the top. This is what buoys Northern morale and pushes Lincoln up over the top. This is the point at which, in my view, the outcome of the American Civil War for the first time becomes inevitable. Once the Union has reelected Lincoln, they're committed to using their overwhelming resources to the full and utter and complete destruction of the Confederacy. Once they are committed to that fully, politically, then and only then is the Confederacy finished. You're probably wondering, when am I going to finish? Let's see. All right, we're don't worry, we're good. Sherman has to now get out of the box that he's in. He's occupying Atlanta. He needs to resupply his army. Best way to do that is to take it to a seaport. That would be Savannah, not Mobile. He's going to take the better part of his army, 65,000 troops, to Savannah. He sends the other part of his army up to deal with Hood. He has now taken it into his head to advance into Tennessee. That's a whole other story. So Sherman does not want to leave anything behind that would possibly be of military value for the Confederacy. So he is going to begin planning, meticulous planning, as only Sherman can do in his careful logistical way, to destroy infrastructure, anything that could be used for military purposes, factories, warehouses, brick buildings that could hold troops, basically all of Atlanta downtown. He's going to order that to be destroyed. He's going to order his unfit soldiers, his extra equipment, anything that might be an impediment on the march, he orders that sent back north. The last trains going back north are filled with refugees. They're filled with unfit, sick, or otherwise, terms expiring, whatever, federal soldiers, some African-American refugees that we have been able to identify, loaded on top of these railroad cars. He's very careful to make sure that no one among his troops does anything with a torch until he says so. Don't use fire until I say so. There's a reward for arsonists, $500. Here's Slocum, commanding the 20th Corps, offering this reward. If any federal soldier starts a fire, arrest him. Fine him for $500. No, we're going to reserve the fire for the last night before we leave, because we don't want to burn the town while we're still in it. Besides, The other thing we're gonna do is, we're gonna take away Atlanta's fire engines. There they are on the flat cars. 2 of Atlanta's 4 fire engines, the Federals take them north. Hey guys, we could use those fire engines, let's get rid of them. They wrecked the other 2. All right, so there's no way to fight fires now in Atlanta. Iconic image of the entire Atlanta campaign, the one that you see in the textbooks, and you see it cut usually just to emphasize this. Taken about November 10th, 1864, within days this will all be gone. Look who this is. Look at this figure. Who is that? Is that a white guy? Black guy. How did you get here? There aren't any black troops, combat troops in Sherman's army, not frontline troops. How did you get there? Well, look, he's got purple stripes, he's in the uniforms, he's got the rifle musket, he's reading a book. What is George Barnard trying to tell us here? By putting this man in this photograph, wherever he came from, if he was dressed for the part, if he was already in the uniform, whatever, did they give him? George Barnard is saying, look what God hath wrought. Look what the war hath wrought. Something unimaginable before we started this thing, a black man in uniform with a gun, reading a book, which was, in most places, banned due to their enslaved status. That's what war's about, says George Barnard. He never actually says that. It's not in any of his writings. We don't know. He never comments on this. I'm reading this pretty obviously. Thousands of people pass this point every day. Slave market. Get on their trains, go around Atlanta. No idea. We started out yesterday with a picture of the terminus point in Atlanta, the car shed, the central passenger depot, the beating heart of the city. That's what it looked like on November the 11th before Sherman orders its destruction. Over the next several days, his engineers and 3 regiments who are given very careful instructions, given a map, what to destroy, how to destroy it. Don't use the fire, use the battering rams. They batter down these piers and they leave the train station, the beating heart of Atlanta, in a pile of rubble. The night of November 14, 15, that's when they're going to set that rubble on fire. Not good enough just to knock it down. We're going to knock it down and we're going to burn it. Now, over here, Atlanta Concert Hall. While this destruction is going on, the last night, a band is playing in the concert hall. For several weeks now, they've been entertaining the troops in the concert hall. This is going to be their last concert tonight, night of November 14th. And as the various work parties go out, as it gets dark, and start to set these various buildings on fire, and the fire, you see it leaping up into the night sky, the band starts in on its last tune. John Brown's Body is the tune they play. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave, his soul goes marching on. 5 years ago, John Brown said, "There shall never be peace in this country until slavery is done for." 5 months ago, Jefferson Davis says, "We are fighting for independence, and that we will have if we have to see every southern city in flames." And now it's happening. Can anyone imagine? My God, this is coming true. Man, I thought this guy was crazy. I thought Davis was crazy. I know John Brown was crazy. Now the son of a bitch turns out to be right. I cannot imagine this. My God, this is like flying planes into the Twin Towers. This is Pearl Harbor. This is, my God, what hath God wrought? They finish the concert, get everybody out of the building, set it on fire, go outside, pack up their stuff, put on their traps, form into line, march off to Savannah. It's good enough. You go downtown, you see that now. That's the railroad bed. This is approximately where the car shed was. That's ground zero for what the world is today. I exaggerate, but slightly. 40% of the city destroyed. This is Steve's estimate. I won't go into this in great detail for lack of time, but bottom line is these areas were planned destruction, and they were placed under guard to make sure that no one would destroy them until it was time. Churches were not to be burned, houses were not to be burned, only targets of military value were to be destroyed, but outside of those guarded areas, as you can see in these dark streets, as Sherman's army is filtering through, some soldiers take it upon themselves to enact a little social justice of their own.